I'm also a professor of film and comic books at the University of Kansas, and I'm happy to be moderating the Superman panel today. Yeah. I go for like 30 minutes, let me bring them out for the last 10. So, start off, we're going to introduce John Shea. John was born in New Hampshire, raised in Springfield, Massachusetts. He went to Bates College, where he played football on the varsity. He then went to a school you've never heard of called Yale for his Master of Fine Arts. He went to school with some people you've never heard of, like Meryl Streep. He then has appeared in over 50 Broadway plays. He has been working as an actor for the better part of 3 decades. John Shea. Next guy you've never heard of. He was born in Michigan, raised in Malibu, California. He went to high school with a bunch of people you've never heard of, like Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez, Robin Shannon Lowe, the Penn brothers, Sean Penn and Chris Penn. His dad was a film director. He grew up in the industry. He eschewed sports scholarships to 17 different universities and chose to go Ivy League as well. Went to Princeton, where he set the NCAA records for interceptions, most in career by games played, and in a season. He was a free agent signing of the Buffalo Bills before he went into acting full time. He has appeared in over 50 films, and the show maybe you've heard of called Lois and Clark. Dean Cain. These two are just seeing each other for the first time in 10 years.
Friendly now.
Because we have limited time, there's a couple different ways we can do this. I want to ask them a couple questions to get going, but if anybody has a question, just raise your hand like your IQs are normal, and we will call on you. We'll bring you to the microphone, and you guys can ask questions of the panel so that we can get what you guys want to hear rather than what I want to hear, but what I want to hear. So, the first thing I want to ask you guys about is you've both been doing this for decades now, even though you don't look like it.
He's calling us old.
Yes, that's a nice way of doing it. When your agent called you, or your manager called you and said, I've got a part, I want you to read for it, or I want you to take a look at it. It's for Superman. It's for Lex Luthor. What happened?
Yeah, they didn't ask me to play Lex Luthor, they asked me to play the other guy. But for me, it was just another audition. It was just a regular audition. They said, it's Superman, there's a new show going out, it's going to be Superman. I was brand new, and I had met some of the producers who were on the show before for other projects, and they brought me in, and I read the script, and I thought, wow, this is pretty unique. I thought I had a real good take on it. I was the first person that the producer sat down in a producer session and read. And Robert Butler was our exec producer, and he had created some great shows, and Hill Street Blues, and on and on and on. He was fantastic. I came in, I said, I have a unique take on this. I think I got a good idea. He said, let's see it. I did my audition. He said, thanks. See you later. And I left. That was it. And then about 3 weeks later, which is normally, if it goes 3 weeks, it's usually dead. I had forgotten about it. And someone said, hey, they like you for that Superman thing. I went, what? Really? And then the process started. It became a reality a few weeks after that. They probably just offered it to John.
No, I'll tell you the story. Well, first thing, so I had a manager who was called me up. I was living in LA in those days, and he said, John, they're having trouble casting the Lex Luthor role over at Warner Brothers for this series called Lois and Clark. And immediately I heard the phrase Lois and Clark. I knew that something was original about it because it's a play on words from Lewis and Clark, obviously, the great explorers. And so I knew there was something clever about it immediately, right? So they sent over the script and I read it and I loved it the way Dean did immediately. I knew that there was a very interesting and a different point of view, which is that they were treating this old mythology of the Superman mythology, the mythology that I had grown up with, that you grew up with, but in a completely unique way, which was that it was almost treated like romantic comedy, with action and adventure mixed in with it. And so, and upon closing the script, I had an instant idea about how to play Lex Luthor. And what they had written and what I understood was that modern villains don't look like villains. You and I know really well after the banking crisis that modern villains dress like bankers. They look like stockbrokers. They'll shake your hand, look you in the eye and say, give me your money, trust me, I'll take care of you. And that's exactly, but we now know that they're all sociopaths. And so the same thing happened with me. I thought, okay, Lex Luthor's going to look like Cary Grant, but he's going to think like Richard III, the great hunchback villain from Shakespeare, you know, walked around like this. Well, in the 1400s, that's how you did a villain, right? Or the 1600s, they had to give him a hunchback. But anyway, so I went in, I put on my best Armani suit, I went over to Warner Brothers, I met Leslie Moonves, who was running Warner Brothers in those days, before he went to run CBS.
And now the world.
And now the world.
Yeah.
And I did my audition, and then he said, that's it, you know, go to ABC, and I auditioned again for Bob Iger, who now runs the world with Leslie.
Disney.
And, you know, I mean, really, honestly, if you want to know how it works, I don't know if you had to do this. Did you go in front of the network and
Oh, yeah.
audition, right?
Oh yeah, I had to do it a bunch of times. I did the network. Kevin Sorbo and I were the last two for
That's
Superman.
outstanding. That is outstanding.
And I heard his audition too, and I was like, oh, I got this. He'll hit me for that one. But yeah, we auditioned with a bunch. There was 3 Loises, there were 2 Supermen, there were some Jimmy Olsens running around, and I didn't know anybody. I was like, okay. And I had done 2 scenes. They asked me to prepare 3. The third one was a just in case. But I heard Kevin do his, and I thought, okay, I got this. I did my 2 scenes. I didn't blow them, which I was very excited about. And I figured, all right, this is good. And then they're like, okay, they want to see you do the 3rd scene. I was like, oh no, what did I screw up? And then I went and did it, and they had to tell me the next day. Because I had some other shows I was testing for in 2nd and 3rd position. And so they told me the next day that I got it. I was madly excited and celebrated, but then I went away that weekend to ski, on a ski vacation I had planned. They brought me back on that following Monday and made me audition with 10 different Lois Lanes in front of the network. And I was terrified that they were going to discover my secret, which is that I could not play the role. I was like, no, I had to do this in front of all of them again. And the last Lois that came in was the only Lois who was at the first network that I didn't work with, and that was Terry. And we had great chemistry, and that was it.
That was it. And I'll just say that when you go to ABC, you know, it's not in a conference room like this. It's a theater, and it's very looks like a Broadway theater or a smaller theater, off-Broadway theater. That is, there are seats and a big stage, and you know, I had to go on that stage and I do it. But I didn't audition with anybody because I did have these monologues that I had to do. And there was one other guy who was competing for Lex Luthor, and he was an old friend of mine. And I thought to myself, the same as you, I got this. I'm gonna bury you, brother. I know you, but this is mine. Anyway, the fangs came out. And then I have to say, the first reading we did a couple weeks later, and I heard Dean and Carrie read, and I thought, oh my God, they are perfect. They are great. Dean is a great actor. He is such a natural actor. He was so real and made Superman, Walt Sarswell made Clark Kent so completely believable, right? Wasn't that the greatest thing? There was no, you know, like, you know, it was just so real. And the chemistry between the two of them and Terry was phenomenal. So I knew I had stepped in, you know, lucky stuff, and the rest is history.
Roles, but you already did.
We did.
Yeah, so I'm actually recasting it in my fan fiction as Sorbo now. That's going to be so much better.
By better, play that other superhero.
By better, I mean awful. I mean, it's going to be horrible. And as far as that show, which is obviously what brings you here to a comic book convention, is that you're identified with 2 of the biggest icons of American mythology. That you guys are always going to be. When you die on CNN, the ticker will say, Superman dead, Dean Cain.
Wait a minute, do you know something I don't know?
Yeah. It's only the 2nd day of the show. We got do you guys feel like that, as some actors do, I'm so blessed that I got this role? Because Mandy Patinkin went to the University of Kansas, he's somebody that he says, Inigo Montoya is the greatest thing that ever happened to me because now I'll be forever remembered as something that everybody loves. No, that everybody will always remember that. And he said, any actor who tells you, oh, I hate that, you know, people on the street, they keep calling me, he goes, I'm glad they remember who the hell I am. Do you guys feel this similar thing that you go to the supermarket and people go, hey, that's Superman, or that's Lex Luthor, or that do you guys feel that way today?
Well, I gotta tell you, it's not horrible to be in the supermarket and someone go, hey, there's Superman. It's not an awful feeling at all, by any stretch of the imagination. And the funny little side note is that I used to check into hotels as Inigo Montoya. That's how much I love that picture.
And I'll tell you another story, that I started on Broadway in the original production of Yentl and won awards for it, and then when the movie came up, I went to meet Barbra Streisand, and they said, no, we want to do this authentically. We want all Jewish people in the cast. And they said, we're going to cast a guy named Mendel Patinkin. And I went, so Mandy Patinkin haunted me, and I said, well, I know he's Jewish, but I just did it for a year on Broadway. And they said, we don't care, you're Irish Catholic, you can't do it.
Well, damn that Mandy Patinkin. What was the original question I had? Oh, it's Superman, being known. I'm happy to be known as Superman. Lex Luthor's a bad guy. I don't know. That's a John question.
Well, for me, I'm happy to be, recognized at all, because when you consider, there are 30,000 actors in the Screen Actors Guild. At any given time, there's 95% unemployment. It's a really tough profession out there. And of the 5% that are working, there's maybe 1% that you recognize. And of the 1%, there's maybe 0.25% that comes to a Comic-Con like this, and gets to travel around the world. And the great thing about Lois and Clark is that it went global. And so I'm sure Dean travels a lot, I travel a lot. I was in Vietnam recently, and I was in China, and people go, oh, I forgot, So, it's a thrill, because what it does is that it opens doors, and I get to meet people around the world that I would never ordinarily get to meet. It immediately cuts the ice in any conversation. So anyway, I have to say it's been a real blessing. And I think of it like you do, as just sort of this rare thing that came into our lives that opened a lot of doors for us.
Now, you guys also both have been acting either John on Broadway and Dean, that you said grew up in it. Do you feel like this is normal to you guys? Like, do you feel like, oh, this is what I do? Like, this is the life that I chose, and this is what I get? Because so many people that I know that have grown up that didn't grow up in a lifestyle like that, they'll say, oh, you could never do that. You could never achieve this dream. Do you feel like that helped you guys, that you were, acting on stage when you were so young and getting your master's, or then when you growing up with it, do you feel like that aided you in getting your parts, landing your parts, keeping your parts, getting recognized for stuff, and then now with what you're both doing with producing and being involved in every aspect of show business, do you feel like that your upbringing helped you with that? Do you feel like it was something that you always felt like you could do, or are you like the rest of us, where you wake up and you look in the mirror and go, God, today's the day to go sell insurance. Like, today's the day to give up.
I think it's a good question. It's completely different answers, I think, from the two of us. You told a great story about this yesterday, which hopefully we'll share now. I grew up around it. For me, it was second nature. If my dad was a carpenter, I know how to work with wood. My dad's a director, writer, producer. I grew up on sets, around it. The kids I grew up with were all actors. John has 30 times the amount of training, classical training, and I think he's a better actor too. It's just a different ball of wax, the way we got into this business. I was in it forever, and realized after going to school on the East Coast that being a banker was not something I wanted to do. A lot of my friends got into Wall Street that I just did not like their lives and lifestyles. I thought it's much more fun to go make movies. And so for me, it was a real easy, natural progression. But John has a great story. You have to hear it.
Well, I'll just say this, that I grew up, like you did, probably with your parents reading you bedtime stories. And I love stories basically more than anything. And so, and I dreamed of being a storyteller. I was the kid who was under the blankets at night, with a flashlight, because, my mother would say, it's time, lights out, and I'd still be, I had to finish that story. I had to find out how it ended, And I have to say, I'm still that way. I never walk out of movies. I'm always watching. I read everything. And so anyway, but when you grow up like I did in Springfield, Massachusetts, okay, Western Massachusetts, you don't know any actors, you don't know any filmmakers, you don't dream of Hollywood, you don't dream of being an actor, it's beyond your realm of comprehension. You're just a fan, and you sit there and you watch this stuff, but you don't dream of actually doing it. And so how does that happen, And I probably growing up around here in Missouri and Illinois and Ohio, wherever else you're coming from, you probably have wondered the same thing. Like, how could I do that? Or my brother and sister. And I have to say that there's a kind of little fateful thing that usually happens. And for me, the story that I told Dean last night was this. I was my sophomore year at Bates, and I had gone to Bates on a football and a debating scholarship because I was
A rare combination.
well, I love to play football. I love sports. My father was an All-American at Bates before me, and so I sort of followed in his footsteps. But then I also loved to debate, which is getting up and arguing in front of people. But then one day I hurt my knee in football and I couldn't do anything, so the captain of the
That
team...
never happens then.
Exactly.
Never happens.
It happened to Dean. We both have our right knees operated on. So the captain of the football team said, you're useless as a player, but why don't you go over and get us some beer, because I made great fake IDs in those days, and I could go supply the beer for the party after the game that night. So anyway, I walked over to the theater where the debating team was meeting, and I went into my backpack to get my fake ID, and the head of the theater saw me sneak in the back and said, Mr. Shea, sit down, read this, And when I joined 12 other people. When the reading of this play was over, she said, you've got the part, rehearsal start on Monday. And I said, what? And it turns out it was the first reading of the next play of the theater department. It was Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare. I was playing Benedict. Anyway, I jumped into the rehearsals, and I realized, I told Dean that the theater or acting is exactly the perfect combination of football and debating. It's a team sport where you wear a uniform, you got a coach who's called a director, you got backstage, which is like the locker room, but you're up on stage like debaters in front of people, and so I was never afraid of that. So anyway, I fell in love with it completely, and so that moment where you feel like you're doing what you're destined to do. Hopefully you all know that feeling, like you're doing what you're supposed to do in this life. I felt that moment, and so I've been doing it ever since.
It's a great story. I thought the story was about beer. You'll get beer and you'll become a movie star. That's my takeaway.
I'm still waiting for my beer. I was told there'd be beer. So, does anybody have anything yet, or do you want me to keep going? All right. Clark Kent, you raise your hand first.
He always does.
Yes.
There's a microphone behind you. If you would indulge us, Mr. Kent.
He never does.
You know so much.
It's almost a two-part question for both of you. One, Dean, when you were playing Clark Kent and Superman, in each particular scene, do you think, do I need to play this? Am I Superman all the time, or were you like Clark Kent? What was your major priority between the two characters? And then for John, my question is, when you were Lex Luthor, were you primarily thinking, I am a villain, let's make this as simple as possible, or am I just a regular businessman thinking of what is the best deal going on?
Well, for me, to answer the first part is that, playing Clark Kent, I borrowed liberally from George Reeves and his version of Clark Kent. I thought that was great. It was my favorite version of Clark Kent, and I took from him there. Obviously, it was a little different because I'm a different person, and it's a different time. It's not the 1920s, 30s, 40s that was that they were representing there. It's a little more woman-friendly. The title of our show, Lois and Clark. Otherwise, it would be Clark and Lady Friday or something. So it was handled different, but I liked the way he played his Clark Kent, so I borrowed from him there. And then whenever I played Superman, I borrowed from Christopher Reeve. He was my Superman growing up. I thought the way he played was right on. So for me, I would just borrow from those guys, and it was real simple within a scene. There was no, the whole joke was always, and it happened finally in one of the shows where Tempest, one of our other bad guys, was like, glasses? No glasses. I don't think there was any tremendous difference in the characters so much. There was a little bit, but I'd say I just borrowed from those guys, to be honest. That's the simple answer.
Before John goes, can I say that Dean, in his rolling number of years, whatever he thought the show took, he was a history major at an Ivy League school. I just want to point that out, that he has no idea what year it is. But
I know the 1948 serials were Kirk Allen, and I know that George Reeves, I think it was probably taking place in the 50s, but I was being self-deprecating. You rat giant.
I'm making fun of the Ivy League education. I never had it.
I want to just say this about Dean. Chris Reed was a good friend of mine. We lived in New York. We had the same agent. We spent a lot of time doing charity work together before he had his accident. I saw him just before he passed away. He was an amazing guy and proved to be a real Superman because of what he did with his own life story. But what Chris Reed has, which is what Dean has, which is an incredibly natural talent to be a movie star or a television star. Movie star is essentially the same thing. Is the opportunity to be truthful with a 35mm camera in your face and 100 men standing behind it, or two 35mm cameras this close to you, and the pressure knowing that it's going to go out globally, well, to millions of people in America, but globally to hundreds of millions of people. So, you have to lose that self-consciousness and to be able to just become simple and truthful in everything that you do is a real gift. And that's the thing that I noticed in the first reading when we sat around the table and read the script together, but what I always marveled at with Dean when we were on the set together, because there was never any moment where it wasn't truthful. And it was that sense of, I don't know, just unself-conscious purity that great athletes have when they run down the field. He couldn't continue his athletic career, but what he did is that he brought the same kind of natural grace to the role, which is why years later it's so iconic. And I have to say Terry Hatcher did the same thing. But that didn't mean that they weren't having fun with it and playing with it. So you saw a real difference between the Clark Kent character and then the Superman character. There was a real difference. And for me, for Lex Luthor, what I
First of all, thank you for that.
Well,
And you're done.
I really mean it. You know I mean it, because that's absolutely the truth. You know? And then I'll say that for me, the Lex Luthor character, I told you that in the audition that we had conceived of this character, and this is Deborah Joy Levine's original conception of the character, and the way I was able to bring it to life was this, that I told you, I thought he should look like Cary Grant, or, you know, a modern villain like Donald Trump, or whatever, you know.
You have better hair.
But that he should think like Richard III. But I had played Richard III in New York, you know, the great Shakespearean villain. And the thing about, and I had played also in a French film before I had done Lois and Clark, called Lune de Miel, or Honeymoon, with Natalie Baye, a great French actress. And I shot this in Paris and New York and LA. And this character, I wasn't sure what he was. I wasn't sure, if he was a sociopath or a psychopath, whatever. So I entered myself into psychoanalysis in character at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City.
Where he was promptly arrested.
Where all the New York City police detectives go to study abnormal psychology. And when the guy read the script, he said, "Oh my God, you're going to play this guy?" I went, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, what's the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath?" And he said, "A sociopath is somebody who unconsciously weaves a web into which his victims fall. He doesn't know that he wants to kill or is greedy or is going to take whatever he's going to take, but he does it, so he does it in a completely smooth, unconscious way, like spiders spin webs into which their prey falls." And that to me was a very frightening concept, right? That you could be a psychopath and a sociopath, and there could be some in this room. All right, we got our eyes on you. But you don't know it. And the thing is that that's how I want to play Lex Luthor, which is that he could therefore could be totally charming and completely in love with Lois and friendly with Clark and all that stuff, but at the same time, he's constantly unconsciously weaving a web in which they're going to eventually fall. And that's the beauty of the Lex Luthor mythology. And, you know, every Superman needs a villain, because without, you know, there was that great scene in the opening episode where, you know, he's on top of the world, the Luthor Gary, he's got billions of dollars, but he's bored because there's no challenge for him anymore until this guy shows up and lands on the game and he goes, "Oh, thank God, let the game
Young man right there.
My question for Mr. Shea is, why base the the Lex Luthor on a Richard III type of villain and not a different type of Shakespearean villain? And for Mr. King, with you doing that Stars and Stripes show recently, how has that recently impacted you? Like either directly or indirectly?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, I'll just say this about Richard III. Having played Richard III, I played Romeo, okay, so I knew what it was like to woo a woman. But the great thing about Richard III is that he woos Lady Anne in the great wooing scene that's a famous scene. He gives her his ring, but then he turns to the audience in a little soliloquy and he says, "Was ever woman in this fashion wooed? Was ever woman in this fashion won? I'll have her, but I'll not keep her." And so I felt this way with Lois, that he could woo Lois, but at the same time, you know, he could delight in the fact that he was really playing with her. And so that's why Richard III became the model for it. We actually wove those lines into the second season when I came back. Anyway,
I was fortunate enough to do a show called Stars and Stripes this last summer, where I got to work. I've met a lot of servicemen and women here at this particular building today, and much respect for you men and women. Thank you for your service. I am a huge supporter of our military. I have been in the past. I was out in Iraq in 2005, and there was a gentleman earlier that was in Kirkuk when I was there. He was out on patrol, so I didn't get to meet him then, but I got to meet a lot of his squad mates and friends. And my grandfather was in the Navy, my uncle was in the Air Force. There was a lot of military in our family, and I have such great respect. And I do travel the world, as John alluded to earlier. I've seen what it's like to live under tyranny. I've seen what it's like to live in situations where you don't have the rights that we have here in America. You don't have the liberties, and I love our men and women in the military for providing that for us. So having done the show, Stars and Stripes, as an athlete, you know, at first when they came to me for the show, told me I was going to asked me to be a competitor, I tried to go on as the host because I figured I didn't want to compete because these guys are badass, you know. And they were like, "No, you're the right guy for it." And I've shot a lot. I'm very familiar with firearms, and I've played enough soldiers and things of that nature. Getting in there with these guys, the real Navy SEALs, the Delta Force guys, Green Berets, SWAT commanders, it was unbelievable. I had a great respect for them to begin with, and I've been to war with them, but to actually be competing with them side by side with these, you know, these live weapons jumping out of helicopters, you know, 30 feet in the air with 70 pounds of gear and no flotation, stuff like that was amazing. I was fortunate enough to have one of my heroes be my partner, a gentleman named Chris Kyle, who recently passed, and it was amazing. The experience was amazing for me. So that was a true career and life highlight, and what it's done for me, because I spent so much time with him and other members of that community and their families, it's just strengthened my resolve to say thank you to them at any and all opportunities, and that's really what I took away from it.
All right, good. What's Aquaman? Sweet.
Mr. Cain, thank you for making my Sundays with my mom most enjoyable Sundays in my entire life. It was fantastic. But you were in Smallville, and you played a character who had lived through the ages. Was that their way of creating Vandal Savage without really calling him Vandal Savage? And secondly, do you have any thoughts on the new Man of Steel? It's coming out this summer. Are you excited? Are you curious to see someone else put the suit on? And that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, first of all, one of the best things I ever hear, when we're shooting the show, you know, there's 50 of us in a room, or 100 of us, and our crew and things, and we sort of live in a bubble. And you don't get to get out there and talk to people when they're watching the show. And it's much more open now than it was back then, but there was really no give and take, so to speak. We didn't get any real reactions. One of the best things I can hear now, and being a father of a child who's almost 13, is that people grew up watching the show, and I'll get sometimes very emotional responses from people who said, you know, someone today was crying because they made them think of their mom who was passed, and that was a big part of their childhood. And I am so honored to be in that position. And I always sort of comment that there's no real show that my son and I sit and watch, and I wish there was. So I try to make him watch Lois and Clark, and he just thinks it'd be So that's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, I think that, yes, in Smallville, I think that was their way of creating Vandal Savage without saying so. That's my personal opinion. They may disagree, but I think so. That was a lot of fun. One of the most fun memories for me was watching Tom Welling go through he had a super speed through something to one other place, and you always have to rehearse that, and all the other actors have to go, you know. And I'm usually the guy super speeding through, and I would just kind of walk through and do the things. But Tom made sound effects. Tom, we don't do sound effects. He's great, and he did it for 10 years and did a great job. He deserves to have 10 years off now, because they worked very, very hard. And then, it's been so long, I forgot what the last part of the question was.
Well, the new movie.
The new movie, oh yeah. I went to the premiere of Immortals, and I got to meet Henry Cavill, who's playing Superman. That's what he's playing, right? He's playing Superman? Yeah. And there's a certain quality, I think, that an actor who plays Superman has to have, and I think that I wouldn't know what to call it, but I think John pointed it out. And I think this guy has that a lot. I think he has it in spades. He's a very good actor, but I think he really will be able to embody the role very well. He's a big dude too. He's a big guy, and I just think he's the right kind of temperament, the right kind of person to play the role. I think Superman needs a kick in the tail because Marvel has been doing such a great job with Avengers and all of that. I think that DC needs to step up their game, so I think they got the right people behind it. And I think it's going to be ready. So I very much look forward to it, and I've been supported 100%. Of course, it would have been nice if they had called me for a cameo too. Just